Register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. I legitimately have a very long show today. I've got 12 stories that I'm going to try to jam into an hour block. 30 minutes, obviously, for everyone. You never know. Sometimes in the middle of the show, I think, okay, you know what? This is just too important. I will share it with the whole audience. So let's see how that goes. But stay tuned in. Buckle up. Here's the first clip of the upgrading charges for Derek Chauvin and the announcement from Keith Ellison, the attorney general there in Minnesota, announcing the charges for the other officers who were involved in the killing and the murder of George Floyd that set off the last week and going into a week and a half of protests across the country.
Today, I filed an amended complaint that charges former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin with murder in the second degree for the death of George Floyd. I believe the evidence available to us now supports the stronger charge of second-degree murder. We've consulted with each other, and we agree. Second, today, arrest warrants were issued for former Minneapolis police officers J.A. King, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao. Finally, I'd like to announce that today, Hennepin County Attorney Michael Freeman and I filed a complaint that charges police officer King, Lane, and Tao with aiding and abetting murder in the second degree, a felony offense. I strongly believe that these developments are in the interest of justice for Mr. Floyd, his family, our community, and our state.
That's Keith Ellison. He was a congressman, and he was a co-chair of the DNC. Now the attorney general there in Minnesota, charging all four men and upgrading the charges for Derek Chauvin to murder in the second degree. This is only the first step towards justice. And the amazing thing is that it took everything that we had. Everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Not only the protest, it took the riots, it took the buildings being burned, it took the National Guard being called out, it took the president of the United States declaring war on us, and it took Keith Ellison being in a position to actually enact that justice versus some conservative, some white supremacist abiding attorney general who would have looked at this and still said no. Much like the attorney generals, the local state's attorneys and the district attorneys who have in so many cases decided not to bring up charges. And in other cases, like we saw in the Trayvon Martin case many years ago, they put forth the absolute weakest prosecution possible, helping the person to get off, helping George Zimmerman to get off. Similarly, in Ferguson, Bob McCullough, I believe was his name. He helped make sure that charges were never brought against Darren Wilson. And so it literally took everything that we had, all of the power that we have at our disposal. It's like to get the simplest amount of, it's not justice, but to begin the very first step in actually getting justice, it was analogous to us having to drop every nuclear bomb that we have at our disposal. We had to give an entire full court press just for us to get the chains of justice in motion. So this is not to discourage us, but it should just to be a reminder rather to us that we have to fight like hell to get an inch. There's not a day that we cannot afford to give a full court press, because we have to give a full court press just to get the very beginning of justice. And there's still a possibility, because now we still have to give more, right? There's a possibility that these guys get off, because police officers all too often do get off. And one of the patrons of the show made a suggestion yesterday that part of this justice, this pursuit for progress and justice, should include every single one of us actively participating in the jury system. Like go and serve jury duty. Do your part, because unless if we always abdicate our responsibilities as citizens and allow other people to serve as jurors and we do not, then you're going to have too many times where people look at a black man and automatically assume that he's guilty, and people will look at police officers and automatically think that they're innocent, and that's how justice will be carried out in this country. So we have to continue keeping the pressure up. And another thing, I have a lot to cover in terms of the protests and the riots, the police riots, because that's what it is at this point. Like, we haven't seen any people rioting. And I'm not saying that as if, oh, look, we're so good, like you shouldn't be hitting us because we're behaving well. What I'm saying is that police are rioting regardless of if you behave well or not. But we have to keep it up because this system does not move an inch unless we disrupt it. Unless we unsettle this system and we make it uncomfortable, it will not budge an inch. So we can't get tired. We have to keep fighting. Which brings me to the police riots in New York. Last night, video after video surfaced showing the police losing their pig minds. They were losing their minds, beating on people who were riding their bikes home from work. The curfew was put in place at 8 p.m. last night. And that was a citywide curfew, not even a curfew to stop public gatherings, right? And it wasn't something that they put in place to stop people from gathering. It was something to shut the entire city down. And anyone who was caught out after 8 o'clock was assaulted by the police. I share video on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter where three police officers beat up a bike messenger with their batons as he was on his way about his business, probably going home. But you can't institute a curfew at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in New York City and expect the city to be empty by 8 o'clock p.m. But even then, and again, I want to reiterate, it's not about us complying with the rules. It's not about us breaking the rules. It is 100% about these police trying to punish the city and show you who is in charge. The city is trying to show, the police are trying to show you that at the end of the day, they run these cities. The mayors don't run these cities. The city commission doesn't run these cities. Any elected official, the city managers don't run these cities. The police are trying to let you know that they are in charge and they can beat you with impunity. And they're not only beating black folks at this point. This is the one thing about this that I'm actually like, you know what? We've been trying to tell you. We have been trying to tell white America. You could go back to video after video of mine. I've been saying it for years. The police state that started in the black community was never going to stay on our side of the tracks. I've been saying it for years that what they practiced and what they refined in the black community was going to eventually be used on white folks. And here, lo and behold, in the most cosmopolitan city on the face of the planet, the police are out there like wild boars, beating down everybody they come across. Because they want you to know, Karen, they want you to know, Carl, that you are not free to do as you see fit. You must abide by what the police say. And that, my friends, is the quintessential definition of a police state. And that, my friends, is why we absolutely can win this. We must win this because now, finally, the secret is out. What these pigs have been doing to black folks for generations is now being done to Karen and Susan and Jesse and Sue Ann. You guys are getting the full force of the police state that has been ever existing in the black community. So the question is, are you just going to sit by and allow them to keep doing that to you? Are you going to sit by and allow them to keep doing that to you because you don't want them to ever stop doing it to us? Or are you going to come to terms with the fact that this is what has been happening to black people for generations? We have been trying to tell you. We're not looking to say, I told you so. What we're looking to do is tear this police state down. We're looking to burn it to ashes so that the only thing that is left is a police officer that will look at you and say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, non-gender conforming individual. Thank you, black man. Thank you, king. Respect the people. The police should respect the people because they are living off of our money. They are living off of our consent to govern and our tax dollars. They better bow the knee to us. And what they're trying to do is to show you that they are going to take your money, your tax dollars, your consent to be governed, and make you bow your knees. So, Karen, I need to know what you're going to do. You're going to put up with this, or you're going to fight back and tear this police state down? All right, let's talk about Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. He is one of the preeminent fascists in this country, and he not only should not be in the Senate, but he certainly should not be writing opinion pieces in the New York Times that are pure fascism. I'll read a little bit of this, but this is his opinion in the New York Times. Tom Cotton says, "Send in the troops. The nation must restore order. The military stands ready." Now, before I get too far into this, I want you to know, full transparency, that I think Tom Cotton is a little bitch. I do. I'm sorry. And I don't apologize for it, even though I just said I'm sorry. I think he's a coward that sits behind the protection that he gets from the Senate security, as well as his computer. And he talks about a good game about being strong. In reality, I think he's a little bitch. But I digress. Let's hear what this fascist bitch has to say. He says, "This week, rioters have plunged many American cities into anarchy, recalling the widespread violence of the 1960s. New York City suffered the worst of the riots Monday night as Mayor Bill de Blasio stood by while Midtown Manhattan descended into lawlessness. Bands of looters roved the streets, smashing and emptying hundreds of businesses. Some even drove exotic cars. Somebody think of the exotic cars. The riots were carnivals for the thrill-seeking rich as well as other criminal elements. Outnumbered police officers, encumbered by feckless politicians, bore the brunt of the violence." All right, let me go down to his core arguments. "These rioters, if not subdued, will not only will destroy the livelihoods of law-abiding citizens, but will also take more innocent lives. Many poor communities, blah, blah, blah." Yeah, you don't really care about poor communities. "One thing above all else will restore order in our streets, an overwhelming show of force to disperse, detain, and ultimately deter lawbreakers. But local law enforcement in some cities desperately need backup." So here he's making the case for the president of the United States to violate the Constitution and to force governors and mayors to accept military troops in our streets when that is against federal law. And the only caveat to that is the president can order troops into states and cities if it is upon the request of the governor of that state. We discussed this the other day on the show. So this is literally asking for not only a police state. Tom Cotton, the little, you know what he is, from Arkansas, is asking for us to be a militarized state, as if it's not enough for these city streets to be patrolled by police officers using military-grade equipment. Here's the real thing that I have a problem with. It's the fact that it will never be enough for conservatives. What is it? There is nothing that a Democrat could do that is going to be enough for conservatives. Because if you look at all of the footage coming out of New York, the true violence is coming from the police officers. The police in New York City are the aggressors, the abusers. They are the rioters. They are the ones who are brutally suppressing and crushing our First Amendment speech rights. They are the ones who are crushing protesters who are doing nothing more than organizing and speaking out. No rioting last night, no looting last night. The only riot that came was from the police officers. And Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, is responsible for that. The mayor of New York City has unleashed the hounds of hell. I don't want to give him that much credit. He has released the pigs of purgatory. Bill de Blasio has released the pigs of purgatory on the city of New York, and yet and still it's not enough for fascist little scumbags like Tom Cotton. So what does this teach us, boys and girls? This teaches us that there is nothing that we can do except break this police state and break the fascistic hold that the conservative movement has in this country, because they will not stop until it is a totalitarian regime. If what Bill de Blasio is doing in New York City, releasing the pigs of purgatory on New York City, is not enough for these fascists, what will be? It won't be enough until you no longer have the right to speak. You no longer have the right to organize. You no longer have the right to be outraged at what this police state is doing to us. That's the problem. The problem is that no matter how far Democrats are willing to go to appease the police, to appease conservatives, to show that they're not weak, to show that they are not soft on crime, no matter how far Democrats are willing to go, there's always going to be some fascistic prick like Tom Cotton who says it's not enough until we bring the full force of America's empire down on us domestically. You cannot appease a fascist. You cannot appease a totalitarian. You cannot even negotiate with them. You have to crush them. And this fascistic police state must be crushed. And people like Tom Cotton must be beaten at the polls so dramatically that they understand that their ideas, check me out. There are ideas that are not acceptable in our society. And the idea of a police state is unacceptable. The idea of a military state is not acceptable. Fascism in any form, even a form that is put in a suit and tie and serves in the Senate from the great state of Arkansas, is unacceptable. And we do not have to tolerate intolerance. A lot of excuses are made for the New York Times and them publishing this article. And the general excuse is the standard excuse that we get all of the time. I always hear it all the time. Free speech. Free speech absolutists, right? Their idea, Olivia Nuzzi, or whatever her last name is, I think she used to be at the Daily Beast or one of those mid-tier outlets. Sorry, I'm flexing. She said the best way to get rid of a bad argument is not to suppress it, but to give a better argument. And that's generally what free speech absolutists like to say, because they can't fathom in their mind the need to crush an idea. The problem is that there are ideas like fascism and, quite frankly, white supremacy that, if allowed to fester and go unchallenged, head to head at the level that they want to have challenge. See, fascism is not interested in having a competition of ideas. It would be different if Nazis were actually interested in competing in the marketplace of ideas. What they're interested in doing is using our liberalism against us to obtain political power and then snatch our freedom of speech away from us. You understand? They're not engaging in good faith. It shouldn't have to be said, but it is obvious. Nazis and fascists do not operate in good faith. And because they are coming to the table with the intention of destroying a certain segment of society and destroying our rights in general, then we have the right to beat the shit out of them. In the marketplace of ideas, yes, but if necessary, in the streets. See, there's a tweet that's sitting in my drafts. I haven't sent it out. This is really how these ideologies work out. And once I say it, you'll understand why I haven't quite tweeted it yet, because, I got to be careful what I say on Twitter. I can't, maybe they suspend me. I don't know. Who cares, right? At the end of the day, I won't care, but I have to at least try. But this is what I wanted to say on Twitter. I'll say it here on my show because we don't give a shit on my show. When it comes to Nazis, this is how the different ideologies think. Conservatives are like, shh, we need their votes. Liberals are like, I'll fight to the death so that you can believe what you want to believe, Mr. Nazi. Progressives, we're generally like, look, I don't want to have to fight you, but bitch, I will. Antifa and communists are generally like, Nazis, bitch, I'll kill you. That's the difference. Conservatives are low-key allowing, and it's not low-key anymore, but conservatives are capitalizing on that because in this two-party system where if you want any progress or if you want any power, you generally have to work through the two parties, Nazis have aligned themselves with the conservative movement. They generally don't believe that conservatives are too extremist enough. They want conservatives to go even further than they do, with the exception of Tom Cotton, because Tom Cotton is like, no, let's just bring down the entire military state in the name of their conservative values. Liberals are like, in this way, these free speech absolutists, where libertarianism intersects with liberalism, they generally like the most noble thing in the world is being willing to fight on behalf of someone's ideas with whom you disagree. That's cute up until the point when those ideas that we disagree on is whether or not I should be alive. And that's when we can no longer play around with this idea of, I'll fight for these Nazis so they can believe anything that they want to believe. I'll fight for to the death to make sure that they can have those same liberties that I have. Meanwhile, they're organizing to make sure that they can kill you, that they can exterminate you, that they can strip you of all your rights. It's really the intolerance paradox. I've done it on my show quite a few times in the past, but I just want to bring it up again. Karl R. Popper actually broke this down quite well. I want to read it to you. He said that if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed, and tolerance with them. In this formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies, as long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion. Suppression would certainly be most unwise. But we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument. We should therefore claim in the name of tolerance the right not to tolerate the intolerant. It is the tolerance paradox. This question has been answered years ago, and yet we're still playing this game of, we have to be tolerant. We have to allow all ideas into the public. No, not when that idea is strategically seizing power at every level of this government. I think it is time out for us to stop this little cute debate whether or not Donald Trump is a fascist. In the first term of his presidency, it was let's have this debate. I had the debate with Michael Tracy, back in 2017 rather. It's time out. We see that the president of the United States is willing to bring in federal troops against the will of state governors and allow them, the federal troops, to suppress people who are crying out because of the police state. They're saying if you cry out because of the police state, we will bring down the whole militarized state. And this is why we don't have time for all of these free speech absolutists who go over and above because I guess it makes them feel more noble to defend Nazis, when in reality, Nazis have far more power than any of the rest of us because they have seized power. Fascists have seized power at every level of this government. And you can call it what you could say. It's not technically fascism, but while you're trying to figure out if it's technically fascism, they're already ready to kill us. And another thing, some of the same people that you see going above and beyond to defend the freedom of speech for Nazis are the same people who condemn us for using our freedom of speech to compete directly with them. See, when you have competing free speech, that means that we get in each other's faces and whoever's group is largest and loudest wins. I mean, that's really how it comes down at the end of the day, right? Because Who's to say that I don't have the right to show up at a Nazi rally and tell them that they need to go to hell? And then show up with 100 people to tell them to kiss our black asses. And then show up with 1,000 people to tell them kiss our intersectional asses. And then show up with 10,000 people and tell them get the hell out of our city. Right? We have the right to organize and speech just as much as your beloved Nazis that you're so busy protecting. But we find too often there's a group of people who find valor in protecting the rights of Nazis at the expense of our right to compete with them. And some of those people aren't just white. Some of them are people of color. And we find too often that that's why it's so important when we talk about black issues to say black, because there's plenty of non-black people of color who are forwarding narratives that are destructive to black communities and narratives that are doing the bidding of white supremacy. Like the narrative of black on black crime being forwarded by my friend Lee Fong over at The Intercept. My music is coming up, so I guess I'll have to talk about that after the patron party. Buckle up your seats. We got a lot of patrons, and I have to recognize them. So let's go.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. At this point in every single episode, I like to take a minute to thank the people who make this show possible. Very special welcome to Andrew Buckler. Thank you for becoming a patron. Maria, thank you for becoming a patron. Eric Fulbrook, thank you for becoming a patron. Acid Bath, Jesse Velez, Lisa Hilton, Uncle Luke, Don't Stop, Get It. Young Cajun for Racial Justice. Okay. Scott Moore, Patrick Seymour, Andrea B, Nathan Reese, Tyler Brandt, Jedi Master Samson, Masha Eve Pack, Sukanya Kuba, Cardex, DJ ×2, Fred, Benny Thompson, Ben Randall, Elucidate Void, Jane Smiley, and none other than Candace Owens. No, for real. No, she's not Candace for real. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, unedited interviews, and none of the corporate advertisements like you're going to receive right here.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yep. Yeah. Check me out. I'm going to do it one day. All right, welcome back to the show. Got a few more minutes for the public show. As always, you want the full episode. Anyone who's listening on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you're listening live, YouTube, go click on the link. I've provided a link where you can go and download the podcast and get the full hour. We're doing this full hour open to the public in podcast only format through the duration of this, whatever this is that's happening around us, this revolution that's going on, because you can't lead a revolution from behind a paywall. But all I ask is that you just go download the public version of it, the podcast version of it. Speaking of Candace Owens, I'm quite sure the reason I have someone who became a patron this morning because of Candace Owens is because if you look at the trend on Twitter right now, Candace Owens is trending like number one most of this morning, and she might be like down to number 2 or number 3. But right after you see her, you see me. And you see her video, and she's talking about, I'm not going to play her video. I downloaded it because I was going to play it, but nah, you already know her shtick, right? And here's what she had to say. Well, actually, hell, I can't even find her video in her own trend. What you find, though, is me. And this is what I said about her. I said, good morning. Candace Owens is a black white supremacist who profits off of being the black face of white racism. Black people can always make a quick buck by being willing to say all the racist stuff that white racists want but can't. Hashtag Candace Owens. So, Candace, congratulations. You played yourself. We know, the game is up. The jig is up. We've always known that there's a lane in white supremacy for people of color and black people specifically who would challenge this move towards justice for all people. That's what it is. The best way for white supremacy to protect itself in this generation is to hire black folks. and people of color who will do their bidding for them, who will tell you that this fight for social justice is invalid because they are hired essentially just to gaslight you, to make you second guess whether or not the police brutality that you saw with your own eyes is actually real, whether or not the injustices that you feel in your bones is real. There is a lot of money to be made if you are a who will take up the fight of white supremacy on behalf of white people and protect that white male Christian power structure that I didn't think up, but they know it is true, so much so that Bill O'Reilly from Fox News said it like this.
They want to break down the white Christian male power structure of which you're a part, and so am I.
So if you are a black person who's willing to protect that white male Christian power structure, then you can make a whole lot of money. Candace Owens is quite the mediocre commentator. She's not really dealing with a higher level of intelligence. And that's ultimately because to get into the KKK, the country club conservatives, where you make a lot of money spewing conservative talk, you don't have to be particularly smart. You just have to do anything you possibly can to protect this white male Christian power structure. And right now, it's her time. She's riding high. But as soon as white supremacy is done with her, they're going to throw her and her bad edges out of the national conversation. That's all the time I have for The Public Show. If you're listening via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you're listening live, click on the link and go download the full hour podcast. Everyone else, stay tuned. There's still 30 more minutes to go after this music. I'll see everyone else next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.